Hey everyone, welcome back to my second channel, and I just kind of wanted to talk about the Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown gameplay showcase. That is such a mouthful that we've seen just like a couple hours ago. Like when I recorded the video, it has wrapped up like an hour ago. So yeah, I think honestly to just kind of like, cut to the chase, I thought the game looked fine. But the showcase was absolutely horrible, and I think that's mainly what I'm going to be talking about, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to talk about the game yet, because despite showing like half an hour of gameplay, I actually don't think they showed all that much. Like what has actually happened in that gameplay showcase. I actually find it kind of impressive that they managed to show the game for half an hour. Like give us half an hour of gameplay, but not really much was happening. Like they were just kind of like driving around the map at first, crashing into each other. Then they went into some sort of nightclub. Then they drove around again, went to like a different location. Then they did a race. And that was kind of it. So I found that really strange. And honestly, like I think it's not really what people were expecting. So with TDU, people have been begging for gameplay for so long. And I think honestly for good reason. The project and the game has been announced for so long. In fact, it was already supposed to be out for almost a full year. So in case you don't remember, the first release date we got for Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown was in September 2022. So the game, if they stuck to that, would have already almost been a year old. And they obviously kept delaying it, and they have delayed it again recently to 2024. I'm not sure if they gave like a specific date. But yeah, they've only given like bits and pieces of like information up until then. And today we actually got to see the game in action for the first time. And oh my god. It looked really rough. Now, obviously, I didn't expect like super polished gameplay, and I honestly don't think anyone should expect super polished gameplay for a game that is still several months away, right? Probably almost close to another year. They had it in the corner all the time that this is alpha gameplay, and obviously you have like a bunch of geniuses that are judging the entire game literally just based on this like super early gameplay. We've had this, like I think the best example really was with GTA 6 when that one got leaked. Right? And people were all like, oh, this game is going to be that. This game is going to be shit. It's going to be great. It's going to be this or that. Already making like tons of judgment on the game that isn't even finished yet. And I think the same kind of applies here. Although, to be fair, it's not quite like the GTA 6 situation. Like GTA 6, when we saw it when it got leaked, was a lot earlier in development, right? This is already like a little bit later down in development. Like it's like a fairly mid to late alpha build, I'd say. And yeah, like the main thing people really focused on was the frame rate. And I find that really silly. And I think people that speak so confidently about something they have absolutely no idea about, right? And I think this is something where I think this is a great example. People just talking about the frame rate and saying, "Holy shit, the frame rate is so bad. This is unplayable. This is gonna be an unoptimized mess." Optimization is the last thing that happens in game development. The very last thing. It's the reason why we've seen so many like super unoptimized, laggy, stuttery games. These last few months. It's because this is the last process that happens in game development. And unfortunately, a lot of recent games haven't really been able to like fully finish optimization before they released, right? So I think it's kind of pointless to focus so much on the frame rates of this like clearly alpha and unfinished build. Now, I will say though, I'm not sure why they decided to go with a showcase of like online multiplayer, right? Like why would you go and show the most unoptimized, arguably the most unoptimized mode of the game, which is like online free roam? Like it doesn't make sense to me. And I think this is ultimately like what bugged down the entire showcase. It was just like a bunch of people sitting down playing the game, an absolutely unoptimized version of the online multiplayer, probably the least optimized part of the game at the moment. And they just sat down and did absolutely nothing. So the gameplay showcase started with them basically just driving around, crashing into each other, not really knowing how to even drive at certain parts where there were cars coming in front of them, and they just hit them straight on. And it was just an absolute clusterfuck. Like it was just not a good way. It just didn't really make for a good first impression. And as you know, first impressions are everything, right? Like you really have to make a strong first impression with your game, especially if you're showing gameplay for the first time. I think one game that has done that really, really well recently was the Crew Motorfest. So with the Crew Motorfest, they've shown also like around half an hour of gameplay, but it was just the entire introduction of the game. Right, so the entire introductory cutscenes, a handful of races that are connected to the to the introductory segment, and it looked great, right? Because obviously it does. It is the beginning of the game. It is the most finished, the most fleshed out part of the game during development. It's the beginning of the game. Obviously, that's gonna be the part that is most ready to be shown off. And I just don't understand why they didn't just do that as well. People were so receptive to the Crew Motorfest. It surprised so many people. It surprised me, even. Like, I didn't expect the Crew Motorfest to look this good, but it does. You know, like, I think it looks pretty good so far. And a lot of people were really, really convinced. And it was generally received well. So I don't know why they just didn't follow foot. Like, when people asked for gameplay for TDU Solar Crown, people weren't asking for, like, full-on multiplayer, online lobby, free roam gameplay. That's not really what people were asking for. People just wanted to see some simple races and maybe like a minute or two of just driving around the map super chill, just to kind of get an idea of what the game is actually like in motion, right? Like what the map looks like in motion, what the cars look like in motion, what the HUD looks like just the bare basics of what this game might actually feel like to play. That is all people needed, really, and it's all people were really asking for. Now, I understand that especially with TDU Solar Crown, like generally like Test Drive Unlimited, it is a social experience primarily, right? Like it was always the social aspect that really defined these games. So I kind of understand that they obviously want to show the one part of the game that makes their game stand out, which is online multiplayer. But I just don't think this is something you should show off right away. Show it off later when people are also more interested in seeing that in the first place, right? So yeah, I think ultimately the showcase, I think it was just not really great and not really something people really needed to see. I think it would have been fine to just show the first couple minutes of the game and people would have been people would have been happy, right? That would have been more than enough. But what did I think of the game? I thought it looked fine. I didn't see anything that was like inherently offensive, at least not something that is like too early to judge, like the frame rate, for example. I thought everything looked fine. The handling looked okay. Physics, I don't know. I don't know about the physics still. Like there were some collisions where the cars just kind of like bounced back into the other direction. We'll just have to see, I guess. But yeah, like to just kind of like come back to my initial point why I just think this was such a bad showcase is because they managed to just not really show anything, right? Like they just kind of drove around, did a bunch of nothing really, then went into a nightclub and just kind of like used emotes to just kind of like dance around, which is also like, who cares? Like, what is this showing? What is this supposed to show me? That I can just do a bunch of like pre-baked emotes in a 3D environment? What can you actually do in the nightclub? Can you maybe buy drinks? Can you interact with other players? Can you maybe invite others to races? Like, what are you actually doing in the nightclub? And it doesn't help that, and this is also like, once again, I'm not really criticizing the game because obviously like alpha footage, but I found it really funny. I'm not sure if most people I think didn't even notice, but I noticed the NPCs that were in the nightclub were all the same model. Like it was just a bunch of clones standing in the nightclub, and that just brings me back to the point: why even show this off? This is clearly not ready, and it will clearly give people the wrong impressions when they notice that it's a bunch of the same NPCs everywhere. Why not just show the part of the game that is ready or is the most polished? Why do you have to go to this nightclub where every NPC is just cloned because the others aren't there yet or aren't ready yet, or I don't know, right? But why would you show it? I just don't get it. But there's just so much we didn't see. Like, how's the career? Is there any sort of story for the single player? What can you actually do in the environments? Is there any customization? Like, just like super basic stuff that we just didn't see. The only thing we know now is you can drive with other people around the map and you can go into buildings together and you can do races together. Great. Amazing. Mind-blowing. Absolutely crazy. And honestly, like, I think if I was a developer at the studio and I was working, I've been working years on this thing, right? So, sacrificed so much time with my friends and family for this project. Probably get paid like shit and have to work under absolutely terrible working conditions. And if I put absolutely everything, still put everything in this project because I'm so passionate about it. And this is how it gets shown off. Super laggy online gameplay with players just crashing into each other, not doing anything of substance. I think I would feel kind of punked as a developer. And that's why ultimately from this showcase, I feel really bad for the developers, because this is not really how you should show off anyone's work, if I'm being honest. And yeah, I hope we see just more gameplay in the future, stuff that actually looks a little bit more polished, stuff that where they also just show stuff that's more substantial. But this was not really what people wanted. This was really not what anyone was asking for. And I think it was, unfortunately, it put a bad taste into people's mouth, and it ruined everyone's first impression of the game, which, as I said, is everything. First impressions are everything, and I think they really fumbled the bag with this one. But yeah, once again, don't let this distract you from the fact that I thought the game looked fine. I'm honestly just kind of glad that we get, you know, an open world racing game where the city is kind of the focus, right? Like, it feels like a lot of open world racing games, they usually have like a city in like one corner of the map, and like 80% is just like forest and nature, which is super boring and not interesting at all. Forza is guilty of that. Need for Speed is guilty of that. So I'm just glad that we get an urban open world racing game for once. So that's something that I think, you know, was fairly clear from the gameplay, and something I'm looking forward to. But beyond that, as I said, we didn't see much, but what we saw, aside from the fact that it isn't, you know, fully polished, I thought it looked fine. It wasn't super offensive. And I think people that are getting extremely upset over this and are already calling the game bad or mid are either extremely stupid because they have no idea how game development works but still speak with so much confidence, or are just contrarians. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with people's heads, but I think for now the most reasonable take is the game looked okay, but the showcase was kind of bad. And let's leave it with that. Alright, thanks so much for hanging out, listening to me talk about TDU Solar Crown. Let me know what you thought of the gameplay showcase, by the way, but I imagine your thoughts aren't going to be much different than mine, because, once again, we weren't really able to see much, and the showcase really wasn't great. But yeah, still, if you have any new thoughts, or if you just want to, like, you know, repeat what I've been saying, feel free to do it in the comments below. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. This was kind of like a fairly rushed video, because I wanted to get this out quickly while, you know, the iron was still hot. Next, we're going to be talking about Twitch and my issues that I had with Twitch. So if you want more ranting on this channel, yeah, stay tuned. Alright guys, thanks so much for hanging out, appreciate it. And yeah, with all that being said, take care. Peace.